the Manoogian Mansion. Dan Perot is with us, the chairman of the Mike Cox campaign. He ran the Lamar Alexander for President campaign and was John Engler's chief of staff. Good morning, Mr. Perot. Thanks for being available.
Hey, good to be with you. How are you today?
Good. Well, I just leave it to you first and foremost, your reaction to this breaking news, or is it news?
Well, it's news in the sense that it's a story. It's, to me, and I think most of Michigan will find it pure fiction, because I think they'll agree that the timing of all of this is very suspect, and that, Mr. Utuma now has been running around for a year trying to find somebody to sign an affidavit, and now he finds someone who, less than a week before the primary election, comes forward, says he's afraid for, this guy's a member of a biker gang, and he's afraid for his life. It all smacks of really, it's really beyond political desperation. It's just, it's beyond the pale to make this kind of claim and then not have, and then say you're afraid for your life so no one gets to know who you are, where you're at, why you did it, you don't show up for your deposition. But you make the claim, you get the news story, and then folks like this morning were talking about it. So I think that, it's out there. I think the Attorney General does all they can do. I mean, you've got to disprove a negative, and we'll see what happens. But I think people that are concerned about it have already made up their mind, and we'll go forward. And I think that they're gonna continue to stick with Mike, because Mike's got the plan for the state.
Were this the general election, we'd be calling it an October surprise. As it were, it seems like a July surprise. Does it worry you that maybe there's no truth to it, but people will think where there's smoke, there's fire, and wonder what the next shoe to drop is going to be?
Well, there's always going to be a small group of folks who will believe that. I mean, remember, Michael Patrick, there's still a small group of people who think that we filmed the landing on the moon. Mm-hmm. There's still a small group of people who think Elvis is, serving burgers in Kalamazoo. And there will be a small group of people who will believe that this thing went on. I don't believe it went on. I believe with all my heart it didn't go on. I'll believe a U.S. Marine against a former biker gang guy who had 3 felonies, who comes forward 5 days before an election to make a claim, and then goes and hides and says he's afraid. I mean, this sounds like a movie script, and a pretty bad one.
It does sound like a movie script, and I'm wondering, in reality, what was the mood of the Attorney General last night? If you had a chance to speak to Mike Cox, he's an intense fellow, it would seem, and something like this, I would think, would send him through the roof.
Well, look, the Attorney General is, he served his country in the United States Marines. I think that says a lot about this man. And my sense is I've never seen him waver, I've never seen him bowed at all. And I think, this is the kind of thing you expect. I mean, this is the sort of thing that happened down in South Carolina. A week out, the Republican nominee down there, somebody comes forward, claims in a sworn affidavit that he had an affair with the candidate for governor. This is how far we've gone in politics today. But it's a contact sport, and you come to expect it. So I don't think, I think, well, I'm sure the Attorney General was upset, frustrated, annoyed. He knows that he's right. He knows that he's telling the truth. And he knows that in the end, the truth will win out.
Why do you think that Kwame Kilpatrick's wife and father do not want to testify in this case? That's another point that we heard yesterday in the news, that they were doing everything they can to avoid giving a deposition. And if they do give a deposition, that they'll be pleading the Fifth.
I have no idea why they would choose not to, other than to say that they just want to get this behind them and move on. So I think you'd have to, you need to talk with them. I don't know why they would or wouldn't want to do it. But the thing that I would ask people to listen is that, remember when the Detroit Free Press broke this story with all of the texting messages, and that's what really got Kwame thrown in the slammer. Mm-hmm. And isn't it amazing that of those 10,000, 100,000, however many tens of thousands of text messages that were sent back and forth, and remember, this was by a man who thought he was invulnerable, that no one knew what he was doing, mm-hmm. He could get away with anything. There wasn't one mention of any of this stuff. Now, wouldn't you think a guy who was talking about all of his affairs would have talked about this? And he didn't, because it didn't happen. Hmm. And I think that's what people have got to look at. That's real stuff. That's real evidence. That's stuff that's out there, that's been written about, that's been reported about, not some, supposedly coward biker gang guy who's out 5 days before an election recruited by Yatuma to sign an affidavit. And don't forget, too, that Yatuma is no friend of Mike Cox. Excuse me. His political agenda is anywhere but Mike Cox. So this is a guy who's out there to get some dough, and I think the Attorney General's right about this, and he talks about this. This is a guy who's out here to get his cut, get some dough. He's looking for a year to find people to share his fantasy that this happened. I mean, it didn't happen.
All right. Thank you very much. Dan Perot, who is the chairman of the Mike Cox campaign, with his thoughts on this breaking story. Fantasy still. Is it still an urban legend?